Back in January, I released a video talking about why I disagree with the traditional method of teaching time signatures using the channel Music Matters as an example. After that, I saw a video of theirs where Garrett said something quite off and made a short video there too. But you might not know that my account is actually blocked on their channel. They won't admit that they're wrong, and I found a few more inaccurate statements on their videos. So let's dive in and talk about the channel Music Matters. Before talking about Music Matters, I will provide evidence that my premise for my original video I could have used other channels. For the most part, they will just parrot the same wrong definition that the top number is the beat and the bottom number is the type of beat.
First question that we are answering is how many beats are in a given measure. For 4, it's gonna be 4 beats in the measure. How are we supposed to know what we're counting? That's what the handy dandy bottom number's for. This is gonna tell us exactly what we're counting, and the different numbers refer to different divisions of notes.
The number on top tells you how many beats are in each measure, and the number on the bottom tells you which type of note gets one beat.
Top number tells us how many beats. Doesn't matter what number it is, that shows us how many beats. The bottom number gives us the value or the quality of each of those beats.
And there are plenty of examples of videos that show the quote differences between time signatures that are actually the same. This last one actually makes another mistake. He uses meter and time signature interchangeably.
A time signature, or what we call the meter of a piece of music, refers to the rhythmic components. So the top number is how many beats. The bottom number is what type of note.
Yeah, that's a video I've got coming up. So anyway, let's get back to Gareth Green. Music Matters is a channel that serves as an educational source but promotes their paid service where you can take their music theory classes. Here's a sample from their channel trailer.
I'm Gareth, and with over 40 years experience as a professional musician, performing, teaching, composing, conducting, and examining, I have a wealth of knowledge and experience that I want to share with you.
I want you to note the line about the 40 years experience. This is important for many reasons. While yes, I only have 8 years of professional teaching and performing experience, this actually won't mean much in the end. To start, we have the appeal to authority fallacy. We should just trust them because of their level of experience, so their word will trump mine, right? Well, that's where I construct my arguments the way that I do. I know that my ideas typically go against the grain of traditional teaching, so I show many real-world examples to support my arguments to disprove theirs. Garrett says to just trust him. Don't believe me?
Now you might immediately say, well, how do we know that? Well, take that as a fact.
Where that clip is from we'll get to in a moment to apply some context, but the point for now is that he doesn't always explain everything and we are to just trust his word, or pay hundreds to take one of their classes to potentially get an answer.
I explain all that in full during the course to which I've just referred.
This is where I differ by offering what I feel is a more accurate argument, and I'll provide real-world evidence. And unlike Music Matters, I encourage the conversation and I welcome corrections. Regarding trusting his word, I showed that he said you can't have a piece that has one beat in every bar. Well, I actually emailed them about this to see what they'd say. My email stated my arguments against the traditional way of teaching time signatures, citing my videos for examples, but also bringing up that they're saying things that are incredibly wrong. I did ask about my account being blocked too, which the majority of my email was actually ignored. I invited them to watch and comment on my videos to show where I went wrong. Again, this was flat out ignored. But Gareth did defend his statement, saying that he wasn't saying that a piece couldn't have one beat for every bar, but that you can't have, quote, compound uno time. No idea why he switched to Spanish, but okay, we'll get to that in a second. To understand this and give better context to his video, we need to know what compound versus simple time is. Thankfully, Music Matters has a video on that. Wait, the video is over 8 minutes long? I can explain the difference in under 30 seconds with examples. Anyway, what's the difference, Gareth?
If you have 2, 3, or 4 as the upper number in a time signature, you're in simple time. If you have 6, 9, or 12 as the upper number in a time signature, you're in compound time. Now you might immediately say, well, how do we know that? Well, take that as a fact in this abbreviated explanation, but I explain all that in full during the course to which I've just referred.
Well, there's a quote from earlier. Now, he does state that he explains this in the Music Theory Grade 1 to 5 course, and no, I'm not sending them, what is that, $200 when I can already prove them wrong. But let's continue the video to the main difference between simple and compound time.
When we're in simple time, the time signatures with 2, 3 and 4 at the top, the time signature means what it says. So the upper number says how many beats there are in a bar, the lower number tells us what kind of beats they are. 6, 8 means 6, remember, how many of something there are in the bar. So there are 6 somethings in every bar. What are those somethings? They're quavers, all right? So 8 means quavers or eighth notes.
Did you catch that? In the same video, he has now provided 2 definitions for what a time signature is. Well, that's problematic, but furthermore, what about time signatures that has a 1 in the numerator, or a 5, 7, 8? The definition he used for 6/8 is exactly right for every time signature. No need to muddy the waters with something else, especially when there are exceptions to this rule. Continuing on, he states that for compound time, everything is divided into 3. So in this case, we have 2 dotted quarter note beats per bar that have subdivisions of 3 eighth notes.
Because in compound time, everything divides into 3s. Remember, we said in simple time, things naturally divide into 2s, but in compound time, things naturally divide into 3.
Alright, so let's debunk this. 2/4 is simple time. That means there are 2 beats to the bar with a subdivision of 2, and the quarter note gets the beat. So the first movement of Beethoven 5 is in 2/4 and has 1 beat to the bar with a more so of a subdivision in 4. And Mendelssohn III's third movement is also in 2/4 but has 4 beats to the bar with a subdivision of 2. Well, that's problematic, so much for it being simple time and having 2 beats to the bar. For compound time in 6/8, that means we'll have 2 beats per bar with a subdivision of 3. Well, West Side Story's America is in 6/8, but every other bar has 3 beats that have subdivisions of 2.
I like to be in America, okay by me in America.
The finale of Ein Heldenleben is in 6/8, but there are 6 beats to the bar with a subdivision of 2. And then there's the Palazzi and Dance number 17 by Borodin with this section that's in 6/8, but there's 1 beat per bar with a subdivision of 2. It's not like I'm finding some random, strange, unknown works for these examples either. To take this one step further, how about the theme from Star Wars? Is this in simple or compound time? Well, we have 1 beat that's in a subdivision of 3, so it must be in compound time, right? Well, you're correct. At the start of the credits, it's indeed in 12/8. But that exact same melody later in the credits is in 4/4, and elsewhere in the score it's in 2/2. Well, wait a second. If it's in compound time, we can't have it be in 4/4 or 2/2 according to Gareth. John Williams probably just doesn't understand how to write music, I guess. How about another example? This is one of the main themes from How to Train Your Dragon. Those beats are definitely divided into 3, so it's most certainly compound time. Nope, it's in 4/4, so according to Gareth, it's in simple time, except in one of the first videos uploaded to the channel talking about simple versus compound, he actually starts out by showing it to you by ear.
Here's an example of a piece of music in simple time. And here's an example of a piece of music in compound time.
Wait a second, Gareth, you're contradicting yourself. Ah, crap, there's silly statements in here. Sorry, one more pivot.
If I had a piece of music that had 6 quaver beats in the bar, it might sound a little bit manic. Something like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's a bit crazy, isn't it, really? And it doesn't really sound terribly musical.
6 eighth note beats in a bar would sound quite manic? Well, people like Bob Zell would agree.
Now, if you played without any accent or feeling, they would be the same. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But then you'd sound like a machine.
But I think Brahms and Strauss would disagree.
In 6/4, we start by plotting 6 crotchets. We divide them into 2 groups of 3 in just the same way, and we say each group of 3 is worth 1 dotted minim. So in 6/4, I have 2 dotted minim beats.
So 6/4, we would group it similar to how we would do 6/8. Yeah, not hard finding an example disproving that and having 6 beats to the bar. As I just showed, no, not anything with 6 at the top has 2 beats per bar. Since we can't really rely on Gareth here, what is the difference between compound time and simple time? Well, honestly, it's just made up terminology that serves pretty much no purpose in the long run, but the general idea is that simple time is where beats are felt in subdivisions in multiples of 2, and compound time is where beats are felt in subdivisions in multiples of 3. This kind of falls apart when we have something like 7/8 time, where we typically mix the two. Would that be complex time? That's my guess anyway, but it's actually called irregular time because they realized that their system was faulty and lumped everything else into this category. There's a serious issue when teaching this way. Musicians get locked into this idea and everything has to follow these rules. So when a piece comes up that breaks these rules, they lose their minds. Seriously, orchestras are on the struggle bus when that happens. Why? Because it's the way we are taught. The reason it's taught this way is as a cheat code to help explain how 6/8 typically works to younger students, but as I've shown, this causes issues later. In the rhythm video, he shows more thoughts in line with this, and he contradicts himself again with these, quote, beat values, as any type of note could technically have the beat as he shows for compound time.
That's all you'd need to know for grade 1 theory on the basics of notating rhythm.
And while I'm giving him crap for these, I will give him a little bit of credit for the whole rest can equal the same as a whole note, or could mean a full measure of rest. That is perfectly true.
So it has 2 meanings. It's either a semi-breve rest worth 4 beats, or it's telling you that the whole bar is empty.
After all of that, it brings us back to, quote, compound uno time. I don't know why he has duple, triple, and quadruple and doesn't use single here. Anyway, this is Garrett's full quote since he's kind of claiming that I'm taking him out of context.
So we say that 6/8 is a compound duple. It's compound because we're breaking into groups of 3. It's duple because there are 2 beats. 9/8 is compound triple. 12/8 is compound quadruple. So some people then think, oh, well, in that case, 3/8 must be another one of these. So it must be something like this, where we've got all that in 1 beat and it's a sort of compound uno or something. Absolutely not. There's a sort of logic about that, but it doesn't work like that because anything with 2, 3, or 4 as the upper number is a simple time. So because 3 is at the top, it's not a compound uno time because it's a bit odd to have a time where there's 1 beat in every bar. Can you imagine a piece that's going 1, 1, 1, 1 all the way through the piece? It's just going to be like a hammer being driven into the ground, isn't it? So you can't really do that.
So he is literally stating that you cannot have a piece where there is 1 beat to the bar and it's subdivided into 3. That can't happen according to Gareth. So it would be impossible for me to find music that fits into this category, right? Well, from my earlier video disproving him, Beethoven 3, 6, and 9 come to mind, Mahler 1, Tchaikovsky 5. I guess these composers just didn't get the memo that you can't have compound single time.
Absolutely not. There's a sort of logic about that, but it doesn't work like that.
While hypermeter can help explain these situations, something I'll define in another video as it's not important here, it doesn't negate the fact that each measure you feel one beat that's subdivided in 3. This is why it's important to understand the difference between a time signature and meter, but this also goes back to the very outdated rules where 2, 3, and 4 in the numerator are simple just by default, and 6, 9, and 12 are compound by default. That's just flat out wrong when you apply it to the real world. Let's change topics. How about modes? In a simple guide to modes, he shows how each scale mode is based off of the Ionian mode, or the major scale, and also states,
Lots of jazz musicians spend their lives talking about modes and how to play in modes. I'm going to go back in history for a few minutes, but if we go back before 1600 into a time called the Renaissance period, or into a time before that called the medieval period, we find composers are writing their music using modes.
yeah, because no other type of composers use modes at all.
But back in the days of modes, the D to D would have been on white notes like this. Sounds slightly strange to our ears, doesn't it? Especially this bit at the top there. But this is a mode that runs between D and D, just using the white notes on the modern piano.
The issue, though, is that it trains the students to identify something based off of a different key center. What I mean is that if you listen to something that's in a mode, you should be able to identify the tonic, or the note that feels like home base. So, the theme to The Devil's Own is in Dorian, but listening to the opening bit, can you identify the tonic? I'm assuming you most likely chose this pitch, so according to the scale, we see that it's in A scale in the key of G, and since A is the second mode of the G scale, it must be in A Dorian. Why do we need to know anything about G major here? Does it sound major? Well, not really. It sounds kind of minor, which is why it's better to understand the alterations of the scale itself and not based on another scale. For Dorian, we need to know that it's a flat 3 and 7 scale degrees from our major, or better, a raised 6 from our minor. This keeps everything centered around the tonic at all times and keeps our mind, in this case, in A Dorian, rather than the second mode of the G major scale. It really overcomplicates things thinking about it this way and is not a simple guide to modes, but rather as a cheat for students to be able to pass the test rather than understanding what modes actually are. While I am a horn player and can most likely run circles around most people that don't play horn as their primary instrument, it isn't surprising that I found an error when Gareth is talking about the horn. But this error is actually so bad, members of my family who are not well versed in horn music caught the error rather easily. Here's his comment.
Now the horn is always in F, so it's always a perfect fifth away. The trumpet can vary because we get trumpets in C, we get trumpets in B flat, we sometimes even have a trumpet in A.
Horns are always in F? No matter what way you slice it, this statement is flat out wrong. The standard horn today is a double horn, F and B flat. And I'm going to leave it at that. No need to mention the other types of horns that exist to further disprove this statement. That's assuming he meant the key of the instrument as he mentions for the others. If he was referring to the music on the page, yeah, it's not going to be hard for me to find horn parts in other keys than F. If you want to make the argument that he's talking about written pitch for today, then why is he mentioning the other trumpet keys or the E flat tuba, which this one specifically I've never seen? I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but would love a tubist perspective on that, but from my knowledge, it's not in commonly performed repertoire. Speaking of keys though, let's take a look at the circle of fifths. It's so named because in either direction you go, the interval will be a fifth. Going clockwise is up a fifth, and going counterclockwise, it's going down a fifth. There are other uses for the circle of fifths, but this is all we need to know to understand this error. Following Garrett's chart, we have C, G, D, A, E, B, F sharp, C sharp, which is great, all up a fifth, but the next note is C flat. C flat is not a fifth above C sharp. It's actually, and harmonically speaking, a minor seventh above. Now, I understand that Gareth is just showing all the keys here, but any other chart shows multiple keys on the same part of the circle. So the C sharp would be with the D flat, the F sharp and G flat would go together, and the C flat and B go together. So why this change? This is honestly no longer a circle of fifths, but more so a circle of keys. The reason we want to know about the overlap is using the circle for modulations, understanding key relationships, etc. This chart just breaks that. Finally for today, let's look at appoggiaturas versus suspensions, which you'd think there's no way to screw up teaching those, right? It's pretty straightforward answer that apparently needs 12 minutes to explain. Well, he does give examples, but what I want to focus on is this part.
And quite often it's written as an ornament and it's just written as a small note. So you might find a little note like this and then a bigger note like this, and quite often it's just got a little mark like that. So if it's written as an ornament, a sort of half-size note with a little slur onto the full note, well, that's what's going on here. So that would be written as an ornament, but I'm writing it out in full so we can kind of see what's actually going on with this thing.
Gareth has now added partial information as a side note, but makes it seem like this is how appoggiaturas are written, but never comes back to it in regards to suspensions. But then we also have the question of what's the difference between this and grace notes that look the same. Let's take a look at the opening bars to Haydn's first horn concerto. In the violin parts, we have a suspension that is written as this tiny note, but the violin 2 part, we have a passing tone that's written the same way. Both are played the same, being 2 eighth notes in the space of the quarter note. A grace note typically has a slash in it, like a few bars later with these neighboring tones. While that is typically the case, these notes have been played as straight eighths and grace notes. So that adds some nice confusion, and if you are curious, yes, appoggiaturas do exist in this piece and are written without the slash. So I admit Gareth wasn't wrong here, but he left out a bit of information, and I honestly think that he would have been fine if he left out the tiny note portion. And I'm sure this is something I have done, but I'm fully open to being called out for it. So feel free to leave a comment on my videos and I'll either explain it in the comments or make a companion video filling in the missing gaps. And of course, if it's a big error that I make, I'm going to pin it to the top because I don't want to spread false information. I'm sure there are more mistakes throughout their videos, but unlike them, I'm the type of person who always wants to improve and have no problem updating my way of thinking and teaching. For now though, I would not recommend Music Matters as a good source for your music education, as they silence criticism and do not correct insane errors. So until next time, stay true and well educated.